Once upon a time there lived a beautiful queen with large breasts. Nick the Dragon Slayer obsessed over the queen for this reason. He knew that the penalty for his desire would be death should he try to touch them, but he had to try. One day Nick revealed his secret desire to his colleague, Horatio the physician, the king's chief doctor. Horatio thought about this, and said that he could arrange for Nick to more than satisfy his desire, but it would cost him 1,000 gold coins to arrange it. Without pause Nick readily agreed to the scheme. The next day, Horatio made a batch of itching powder and poured a little bit into the queen's bra while she bathed. Soon after she dressed, the itching commenced and grew intense. Upon being summoned to the royal chambers to address this incident, Horatio informed the king and queen that only a special saliva, if applied for 4 hours, would cure this type of itch, and that tests had shown that only the saliva of Nick would work as the antidote to cure the itch. The king, eager to help his queen, quickly summoned Nick to their chambers. Horatio then slipped Nick the antidote for the itching powder, which he put into his mouth, and for the next 4 hours, Nick worked passionately on the queen's large and magnificent breasts. The queen's itching was eventually relieved, and Nick left satisfied and hailed as a hero. Upon returning to his chamber, Nick found Horatio demanding his payment of 1,000 gold coins. With his obsession now satisfied, Nick couldn't have cared less, knowing that Horatio could never report this matter to the king, and with a laugh told him to get lost. The next day, Horatio slipped a massive dose of the same itching powder into the king's underwear. The king immediately summoned Nick. The moral of the story: pay your bills.
Two physicians boarded a flight out of Seattle. One sat in the window seat, the other sat in the middle seat. Just before takeoff, an attorney got on and took the aisle seat next to the two physicians. The attorney kicked off his shoes, wiggled his toes, and was settling in when the physician in the window seat said, "I think I'll get up and get a Coke." "No problem," said the attorney. "I'll get it for you." While he was gone, one of the physicians picked up the attorney's shoe and spat in it. When he returned with the Coke, the other physician said, "That looks good, I think I'll have one too." Again, the attorney obligingly went to fetch it, and while he was gone, the other physician picked up the other shoe and spat in it. The attorney returned and they all sat back and enjoyed the flight. As the plane was landing, the attorney slipped his feet into his shoes and knew immediately what had happened. "How long must this go on?" he asked. "This fighting between our professions? This hatred? This animosity? This spitting in shoes and pissing in Cokes?"
After 20 years of marriage, a couple was lying in bed one evening when the wife felt her husband begin to touch her in ways he hadn't in quite some time. It almost tickled as his fingers started at her neck, and then began moving down past the small of her back. He then slid his hand across her shoulders and neck, slowly worked it down one side, then the other, stopping just over her lower stomach. He then proceeded to place his hand on her left inner arm, caressed downward again, working down her side, passed gently over and then in between her back and down her leg to her calf. Then, he proceeded up her inner thigh, stopping just at the uppermost portion of her leg. He continued in the same manner on her right side, then suddenly stopped, rolled over and became silent. As she had become quite aroused by this caressing, she asked in a loving voice, "That was wonderful. Why did you stop?" "I found the remote," he said. A woman was in her physician's office when she suddenly asked him to kiss her. He replies, "I can't, that would be against my code of ethics." 20 minutes went by and the woman again pleaded for him to kiss her. Once more he refused, explaining as a doctor he simply could not. After another 15 minutes passed, the woman begged him again. "Look, I'm sorry. I just can't kiss you. In fact," he sighed, "I probably shouldn't even be fecking you."
A guy suffering with hemorrhoids regularly visits his physician for his ointment application. This time the physician was on leave for the weekend, so he goes home and asks his wife's help to apply his ointment instead. So he gets ready by going down on all fours, and the wife begins to apply the ointment. After a while he realizes that his wife is resting only one hand on his shoulder, and inquires what was she busy doing with the other hand. The wife calmly replies that she is applying the ointment with the other. Hearing this he chuckles and says, "No wonder the physician is charging me $100 for every visit. It takes great talent to place both the hands on my shoulders and still manage to apply the ointment."
A physician, an engineer, and a politician were discussing who among them belonged to the oldest of the three professions. The physician said, "Remember, on the sixth day God took a rib from Adam and fashioned Eve, making him the first surgeon. Therefore, medicine is the oldest profession." The engineer replied, "But, before that, God created the heavens and earth from chaos and confusion, and thus he was the first engineer. Therefore, engineering is an older profession than medicine." Then, the politician spoke up. "Yes," he said. "But who do you think created all of the chaos and confusion?"
The hospital. A sweet old lady telephoned the hospital. She timidly asked, "Is it possible to speak to someone who can tell me how a patient is doing?" The operator said, "I can. What's the name and room number?" The old lady in her weak voice said, "Doreen Jacobs, room 604. The operator replied, "Let me place you on hold while I check with her nurse." After a few minutes the operator returned to the phone and said, "Oh, I have good news. Her nurse just told me that Doreen is doing very well. Her blood pressure is fine. Her blood work just came back as normal, and her physician, Dr. Ross, has scheduled her to be discharged on Tuesday." The old lady said, "Thank you. That's wonderful. I was so worried. God bless you." The operator replied, "You're more than welcome. Is Doreen your daughter?" The grandmother said, "No, I'm Doreen Jacobs in room 604. No one tells me shit."